285. What's up? This is Simon. I just want to take some time to show you guys a little bit about WPF and some of the basics when it comes to designing the GUI of a WPF project. I won't be doing much coding. I will just be showing you some of the simple functions of the XAML, and as well as how to create some of the simple controls in WPF. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do, obviously, I've already opened up Visual Studio 2012. I'm just going to hit New Project, and let's call it Demo WPF Application. Okay, so it opens up a very simple main window and the corresponding files that it needs for a simple WPF project like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a splash/login screen for this application. So the first thing you would want to do is add a new item, and we're going to make a WPF window. I'm going to call this splash.xaml. Hit add, and it adds this simple window just like the main window, but it's called splash.xaml. First thing I'm going to do is resize it, make it 500 by 500 pixels, and what I'm doing is I'm editing this XAML code right here, which corresponds to this view up top. As well, you have the properties of this whole thing on the right here. Some of you might be familiar with this, some of you might not, but if you go into the layout, you can go in here and change the properties as well. If I change this to 600, then it changes it in the XAML as well. If I were to say that I wanted to add a margin to the right for 400, then it adds a margin over here for 400. So let's first add a background to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a folder with my media files, new folder called media. I'm going to add some existing items that I've already downloaded from the internet. Go to my WPF tutorial, change it to all files, and import these four things. The first is a background that I'm going to be using for the splash screen. The other two are some icons for buttons that I'm going to be using, and then the fourth is an icon for the program itself. So the first thing you can do is you can go to this splash XAML, and let's add a common property of the icon and change it to this icon right here. We're going to do the same thing with the main window. Change the icon to this icon.png. What this is doing is it's adding the icon that will eventually show up on the toolbar in Windows when you run this application. It'll also appear in the topmost left corner of the window. What I'm going to do with this XAML is I'm going to do some things that are not very conventional things that you would normally do with the window, but I'm going to say window style equals none. What that means is it's taking away all the borders of this window. I'm going to also change allows transparency to true and window startup location to center. Center screen. And then the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go into these properties on the right, go to brush, and change the background to an image. Okay, let's see. Window. Background, image, and the image source will be this green background. As you can see, this green splash image is now going to be the background. This is a PNG with transparency around the edges. So when I run this program, when I run it, it should display with the transparency. Oh, look at that. Obviously, the main window was a default window to be opened. So what you have to do is you have to go into the app.xaml file and change the startup URI to splash.xaml. Now when I run this, this is what appears. Now you obviously can't move this around or anything, but when you click on the icon the window closes, the window opens. When you click in the background, it changes the background program to be the program into focus. So let me show you how to make this movable. Go to the grid of the splash screen, and we're going to add a mouse left button down action and call it move. Alright, then we're going to go to the actual code behind this XAML called splash.xaml.cs, and we're going to add a method called move. Private void move, and E is going to be that. And what happens when this method is called, it drag moves whatever is being pressed. That's to be capitalized. So now when I run this, this thing is movable, as you can see. It has some weird stuff going on around the edges, so let's do this. Alright, the last thing I'm going to do to get rid of that ugly border is I'm going to go into the properties of this window and say border brush equals transparent. Alright, now let's add some controls on here to make the user able to actually log in. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a button. This is going to represent our minimize. I'm going to take away the content property, which means that it will have no property. I'm going to go in here and change the background to an image source called delete. I'm also going to go into the properties of the button and say border brush equals transparent. And I'm going to actually call this button something because we're going to be using it in the code. So I'm going to call it btn close. Then I'm going to take the button, copy it, paste it, makes a replica. It's called btn close underline copy. And we're going to call this minimize. And we're going to change its image to the minimize icon. So if you double click on this button, then you're enacting the click action of that button. So I'm just going to do a simple this.close, and it will close that window. I'll double click on the other one, and I'm going to change this to this.windowState equals windowState dot minimized. I'm also going to add a text box. Let's call this text username, and then I'm going to add a password box right underneath that. Let's change its height to 23 as well. And then finally, let's add a login button. Call this login. And we also have to name these text box, this text box and password box. So I'm going to call it UN. PW. And when you click this login button, let me double click this, I'm going to verify whether the correct credentials have been entered. Now obviously you want to do this using a database connection or similar. You don't want to hard code this, but for the sake of a demo I'm just going to hard code the correct credentials into the code. So I'm going to just add a simple if statement. If UN equals Simon, and password equals password. Then I have to add the dot text property and dot password property. If that's correct, then I'm going to close this and I'm going to open the main window. Before I do that, I have to actually instantiate the main window. Main window m equals new main window. And I can use this m to manipulate the code. I'm going to do m.show. And I'm also going to add an else statement for if the incorrect credentials have been entered. Message box.show incorrect. Alright, let's try this out. As you can see, I have my window that's movable. I can minimize it. I can open it again. I can close it. It actually closes the application. It should stop running after just a little bit. Run it again. Now if I enter in any username, any password, and hit log in, it says incorrect. So I'm going to add Simon, spell it right, and I'm going to type in password and hit log in, and it loads the main window. So there you have it, just a simple tutorial on how to create a simple WPF splash screen.